Hello and welcome to Some of My Friends Read Comics. We've got Vince.
I'm a Swamp Thing.
Spoiler alert. Jeez, we got Chris.
I summon tiny monsters.
Great.
Oh, I should have done Swamp Thing. You make my butt sting. Right?
All right.
Mixed with Major
We're
League
talking
2.
about Swamp Thing today.
You can link to that on the show notes, Vince.
Oh my goodness. That's Swamp Thing's biggest problem. He has no catchphrases, right?
That's his
been the
biggest
reason
problem.
he's never hit the mainstream because of that reason. He needs a good catchphrase. That's all he needs. Or maybe, just some better writers. So we're reading some Swamp Thing from the 80s when Alan Moore took over. Have you heard of him? He's a comic book writer. Yeah, you've heard of him before. And he kind of took over Swamp Thing and recreated him a little bit, kind of went in a different direction that the series had been going in, and it's pretty cool. What do we really need to lay the groundwork? I mean, most people, it took me, I don't know when I realized that Swamp Thing is a DC comic book character. I think growing up it was just like the weird movies, and that was kind of it.
Well, that was what was weird to me, is that Swamp Thing actually had movies. Like when we were growing up, and a TV show, and a cartoon. Like in an era where like the Batman movie was a big deal, like there was no Superman movies being made when we were like aware, no Marvel movies other than like the TV movies, and then I keep seeing these previews for like Swamp Thing, and I'm like, why Swamp Thing? And even like when I got into comics in like the mid 2000s, I'm like, why did Swamp Thing get 2 movies? I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
I think it's one of those deals where it's a comic book character, but it's like Blade or one of these other things where people just forget that it's from a comic book. Where you're just like, it's just a monster, who I don't know, he's very tragic and likes nature, I guess.
Right.
I guess. Also, not to be confused with Man-Thing, which is a Marvel creation, which I think came up right around the same time as Swamp Thing.
Because Lin Wein and the guy who created Man-Thing were roommates.
Yeah, Marv Wolfman.
That's right, yeah.
literally in the same house, create the same character.
Like 6 months apart, maybe, of first publication for both of them. Like, it's real close, and it's a little fishy. I don't remember who came up with who. But,
there's... In Marvel The Untold Story, they're collectively called Len Marv. I guess that was a nickname that they had because they're like, this is basically just, if you talk to one of them, you're talking to both of them.
That's funny. Swamp Thing, created way back when, went away for a while, and then during, I guess, some 80s movie that was out, they brought the series back, and it wasn't doing too well, and that's when Alan Moore took over. And he said, all right, we're going to take things in a totally new direction. He took over with issue number 20, which if you buy the Saga of the Swamp Thing trades that they put out, it's basically just the Alan Moore stuff. So you can just start with volume 1 there. But issue number 20, or I guess the first issue, is called Loose Ends because it really is him just cleaning up all the loose ends from the other writers so that he can start to tell his own story.
Well, and it's usually not It wasn't up until like 08, like with the Saga of the Swamp Thing. It wasn't in collections for this run. Because it doesn't match up with the run at all, aside from like Alan Moore like literally killing off everything the creator Lin Wein had done with Swamp Thing. He's like, this is done. I just got to spin an issue like just saying like this is all stupid and that's done, so we can go to my real story.
Yeah, it was not a lot of Swamp Thing in this issue. It was a lot of humans that knew Swamp Thing, but also some branch of the military was chasing him and killing just everybody. And it's a very skippable issue. I found myself not really caring about any of the people in here. I was just like, okay, they're dead now.
It's weird because like if you were actually a fan of that run, it's like it's a fuck you to everything you read issue. None of this matters anymore. Like if you were in the middle of a good run, it'd be like, this doesn't matter. We're just an issue fixing this.
But I don't think that's exactly fair because Abigail Arcane and her husband are still here. This is isn't this the issue where they kill off Arcane for a while, who was like kind of the main villain of the first, of the original Swamp Thing run. So it's not like he's just like, we're not going to talk about this. It's like, this is kind of wrapping up on a couple of the characters and not dropping all of them, but he does pare down to where it's only like only a few of these are going to be important.
So a big driving part of this whole run, though, is the idea that I think prior to Alan Moore's run, Swamp Thing was a dude who became the Swamp Thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He was a doctor who created some chemicals and then fell in the swamp and mixed with the chemicals and turned into this plant creature.
Every superhero origin under the right. sun. Science experiment gone wrong. But I think Alan Moore broke the concept, and he decided, he's like, no, the dude is dead, and the plants decided that they were the human and were very confused. And so,
yeah, you're kind of jumping ahead a little bit because that's what they talk about in the next issue.
But that's the whole run, and I feel like Loose Ends is kind of like killing off the prior concept to establish this new status quo and perspective for Swamp Thing. It's kind of all
in a way. I mean, Loose Ends, I would say, is more literally killing off everything else before we really get to all that. Because even that issue ends with him getting shot up by snipers and rifles and everything, and falls down, and that's where Alan Moore's first issue ends, with Swamp Thing dead on the ground. But his next, by the end of this one, I was like, ugh, what am I in for? Am I really going to enjoy this thing? But then the next issue is like, all right, now we're really going. And there's, again, not a lot of Swamp Thing in it because he is dead and under the knife with Dr. Woodrue, was that his name? The Pharaonic Man?
Yeah. Which is actually a great introduction to the concept of Swamp Thing, like the way that this issue. It's not very action packed, and it doesn't have a lot of Swamp Thing, but I feel it gets you on board.
It's a horror issue for sure. Like this, Alan Moore writes Swamp Thing as a horror comic and does a great job with it because it has that pulpy horror style. It has that sort of slow build of like he's jumping back and forth in time, like, oh, the old man hired me for this. I can hear him, and a lot of that style of narration.
Oh yeah, it's Twilight Zone. It's all of the Vertigo horror books, like your House of Mystery, House of Secrets, all those kind of. I mean, EC Comics even, like it's a fun vibe to it, and it's very morose. It's called the Anatomy Lesson, and I like any book that says, or anything that says there will be blood, and you're like, yeah, there's gonna be blood. I really like that. Like first page, it starts that way. It's got great lettering. Like the title's done is called the Anatomy Lesson, and it's like done like.
What is your obsession with lettering, Vince? I never understand that.
I was a letterer for my comic company.
Yeah, I was gonna say he actually pays attention to it.
Yeah,
that's true. It does have good but the art in general. Who did the art? Steven Bissette.
Steven Bissette, yeah.
Really great composition and all this stuff. Like just the way the panels flow from one to the other, the way he frames stuff. It's really just like moody and fun, and not really fun. It's horrific, but great horrific, fun horrific, right? Skulls,
terrific horrific,
terrific horrific. So this doctor has been hired by whatever army guy. He's like, oh, you're a bad guy, but I'm going to get you out of prison because you're the best at plants. Figure out what's going on with this guy. Autopsy. Tell us. And, he's racking his brain trying to figure out, like, oh, this chemical that, what's it? Dr. Alec Holland. That's who the Swamp Thing is. Dr. Alec Holland. The chemical he made should have only worked on plants. What is it? Until he realizes, oh my God, Alec Holland died in that swamp, and it's all the plants that learned from his body when they, absorbed and ate his body, and they think they're him. Which is such a great wrinkle for the character, because now you have this living piece of plant matter that's walking around, just thinking it's human rather than being a real human. And it really doesn't change anything, but it does give the character someplace else to go.
It
which
gives them a lot of what does it mean to be human?
Exactly. Which is it's kind of one of those reasons I always like robot stories, like The Vision right now has a lot of that sort of stuff going on. Certainly always has.
Right.
But to do that with a plant man, I think is cool.
And it kills the I don't know. I didn't read the saga of the Swamp Thing before Alan Moore got there, but it kills the Thing style, oh, can I ever be human again? Kind of storyline. Right. It's no. Yeah. No, it's done.
Yeah. So he wakes up from this frozen state.
vegetative state,
kind of. Yeah, exactly. Floronic Man kind of goes crazy and turns on his boss that hired him and like traps him in there with Swamp Thing, who has read the report now and knows that he's not really Dr. Holland, and so he's mad and kills the guy. And so Swamp Thing's awake now and he's ready to go.
So was a Floronic Man a villain before this? Did he exist? I guess he had to have existed before this because the JLA fights him later, and they're like, he's never done this before.
Yeah, I was looking him up. He had existed before, had some different names. I guess he's still around as well, but one of those very not important minor villains.
He was a Silver Age villain, but not of anyone important. So he was kind of a deep pull. It's really like when you read Alan Moore, for any of you like modern comic book fans, just picture Jeff Johns, but good. Where he digs out these characters, but actually has interesting stories to tell with them, and is not just living off nostalgia.
Because this is great. It's like a villain who's like intellectually interested in Swamp Thing, not like twirling his mustache like I'm going to get the secret power from the Swamp Thing. He's like really like interested in Swamp Thing, and his narration carries that through. And like he's petty and he's bitter, and that shows its way out through the army general. But it's really like I don't know if Moore is the first person to ever do this, but it was the first time I had ever really seen this kind of like novel perspective of like the thoughtful villain that was like kind of like entwined with the hero. It's the same reason I like that Web of Death story from Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus, where Dr. Octopus was just like not gonna fight you, just like intellectually curious in Spider-Man. It tickles that same itch for me.
Yeah. Right. The parts of the story that I really did not get into at all were pretty much anyone else that's a human, because maybe it's just because there were so many in that first issue that I just stopped paying attention. But like Abigail Arcane and her husband, like I just kind of was not interested in anything that was going on with them. I'm sorry. I know.
I've read current-ish Swamp Thing. I read it when he came back with the New 52 with Scott Snyder and Yannick Paquette, and I was like, Abigail Arcane doesn't have a husband? In fact, like, Swamp Thing's into her, so, like, who's this jabroni husband here? Like, what's going to happen to him? I bet he's going to die pretty quickly. Because was also Alec Holland also, like, had a wife and she's dead or something?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was like, this doesn't come into play 30 years later, so I don't care.
Oh, no, they have flashbacks to it in the next issue. Yeah, in issue number 22, it's a lot of Swamp Thing in his head, remembering all of Alec Holland's memories, and his wife Linda, and how she died, and all that. And it's a very introspective issue with, just Swamp Thing trying to figure out who he is and what he wants to be, and Floronic Man kind of starting to go a little crazy. He's eating like pieces of like plant tissue or something like that. He's eating some weird stuff.
Well, that's what gets him. I mean, he's literally eating the Swamp Thing's whatever yams that he's producing, and it's so he can contact this like sort of plant intelligence.
Yeah, because he's got his own plant thing, and it starts to like infest his brain and talk to him, and he's going crazier and crazier. At the end of this issue, he's pretty much like, all right, I'm the Floronic Man again, and I'm gonna, take over the world because I'm a plant, and plants deserve the world. Woo! That kind of thing.
Chris, I think when we last talked about Alan Moore, like you told me that like Alan Moore is very prescribed in how he directs his artists to do their panel structure and what goes in each panel, much more than I think typical writers do.
Right. Especially at the time.
Yeah. This is very early Alan Moore. I don't think he had done anything besides like Miracle Man or Marvel Man really before this, and maybe some 2000 AD. Like he hadn't done Watchmen.
Captain Britain for Marvel.
Yeah, this is like his first kind of American stuff other than Captain Britain for Marvel.
He may have done V for Vendetta around this time.
I think it was a little later, but yeah.
But this seems like more dynamic panel construction than I've ever seen from Alan Moore. But maybe I just haven't read enough Alan Moore.
It's not you just haven't read enough.
Okay. Because it's it's very dynamic, the art, and I was wondering if like Moore did that or Bissette chose to do that, because it's much more organic in the way it does its like panel construction and like panels on top of panels, like not symmetrically and not uniformly, and then the coloring is just like fantastic because it's all like a lot of blues and grays, so Swamp Thing really shows up in his green.
Yeah, there are, I like it a lot, but there are some times when the coloring got a little samey. Like if there was one picture with like a whole bunch of plants all around, all those plants were green, and it was hard for anything else to stand out.
Yeah, it's hard to color that many vines, though.
It's very hard. And that's just every once in a while. Most of the time, it's great. But I was like on a few of those really big pages, I was like, oh, okay, that I feel like everything's hidden now. But most of the time, yeah, the coloring is beautiful. Really love it.
Yeah, it's. I mean, spoiler alert, I guess, for the end of this, but everyone should read this just because the way that Alan Moore tells this story, which is a lot of like flashbacks and like everything you thought you knew kind of storytelling, but the way he does it, you're not like, oh, nothing's happening, this is boring. Like it's staged in a way and it's told in a way that even for like a movie, it would be hard to do. Like it's very visual, which I really like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really said the year. This is 82, 83?
Yeah, this is, I think, 83.
Yeah. So our next issue, Floronic Man is in, full force. He's going around, like, trapping people inside their homes, torturing people. He is threatening to remove all oxygen from the world because the plants control
add
it.
More oxygen to the world.
Oh, is that what it is? I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. Wait, what's that going to do?
It's gonna.
Oh, I know. Oh, that's right. If you light a match, everything will explode. That's why.
But I'm like reading about all this like climate like change stuff right now, and I'm like, and I watched like the Atom Ruins Everything, and they're talking about the amount of carbon dioxide that's in the air, and if this much carbon dioxide gets in the atmosphere, then like we're gonna have a problem. I'm like, Floronic Man, we need you. Like, come save the world right fucking now. Just add a little more oxygen to the planet, and we'll be set, and then we can have our cars, and we'll be fine. A carbon footprint. Like, really, like, Floronic Man should be a fucking hero. Like, just say, like, give me $1 billion, and I'll save the planet. And everybody will be like, cool, let's pool our money together, we'll be fine. That's what I would do if I had Floronic Man's power, specifically that. How about doing $10 million?
He's driven crazy, though, Vince.
Yeah.
You give me $10 million, I'll do it.
You don't have that power to shoot oxygen out of your butt.
What if I did?
Well, that'd be great. There's I feel like, I don't know, I'm trying to describe what else happened in this issue. It was just a lot of Floronic Man running around, getting people, making some guy film it all, because he's, like, kind of a jerk. And it just ends with Swamp Thing approaching him and saying, all right, this is it, final showdown. But in the next issue, guess what? Enter the Justice League of America. They're on the cover. But not really. I feel like the Justice League kind of sits around going like, well, we're beat. We can't beat this guy.
Yeah.
And
they're like, keep an eye on it.
Green Arrow. And Green Arrow is just like, but who's going to watch out for Louisiana? Come on. And
Arrow is he's such a fucking liberal wet blanket.
I get it, but like the Justice League, they do a pretty good job of monitoring the world and keeping track of stuff. Like,
you care about green men and blue men, but what about the black man?
That's a different storyline.
So there's not really much of a big fight. Really, it's just Swamp Thing talking to Floronic Man, saying, "Hey, you're not a plant. We don't give a shit about you." And the plants stop talking to him.
And he thinks he's operating on behalf of the green, which is the concept of like plants. And he's like, I'm gonna make the world great for plants. I'm gonna give them lots of oxygen, or I'm gonna kill all the humans and kill every animal and everything. And so then plants can take over the world. And then he goes, and Swamp Thing's like, then we'll have no fucking carbon dioxide to breathe, you idiot. And then Floronic Man's like, oh, fuck. I didn't think about that. I like that that's how he beats him.
Yeah. And the plants, like, apparently were also listening because they just stopped talking to him. He's like, oh, my plants, where'd everyone go? And he's sad, and he decides, okay, well, I'll be a human again. And yeah, it is really cool because he's like, all right, well, the plants rejected me. I'm going to go back to being human. And he tries to make himself, like, look human in a really, again, horrific way, a horrific way. Where he's just, like, patched together, like, pieces of stuff onto him, and he's just, like, looking all gross and weird. And that's right when the Justice League shows up to take him away and, take him to Arkham Asylum, or whatever asylum they're taking him to.
It's good, like, disturbing kind of horror comedy, because he's like, it's me, I'm human. And he's just disgusting, and they're like, what the hell is going on? He's like, oh, you mean my separated shoulder? Don't worry about that. It's just like, what is happening?
It's very, very creepy. But I like it. I mean, this thing is just wonderful.
Well, what I love about this is, and I love about Swamp Thing in general, especially the Snyder New 52 run, which I can't help but bring up again, is it brings up the concept of like this symbiosis between plants that are the green, animals that are the red, and then all like rotten decay things, the rot. And there's like this symbiosis between the three through Swamp Thing that like you think like, oh, we're on Swamp Thing, like the green is good and the red's okay and the rot's bad. And like they all circle of life have to work together. And I really like that this story, I don't know if this is the first introduction to that concept in Swamp Thing, but that's what I really appreciate about Swamp Thing is like the idea that like animals and plants, they need to work together to like be in a symbiotic relationship. You can't have one or the other. And I think that this book has this particular issue has a really good like perspective on that. Of it's like like, oh yeah, well all the plants will die because humans are ruining the world. And it's like, well, not really. Like they have problems, but we need them because we need their carbon dioxide. So I like that concept.
I like too that the previous issue sets it up where Swamp Thing shows up behind him and he's like, this ends, and you're like, oh, time for the big showdown. Mm-hmm. But then like Swamp Thing doesn't really do anything except be like, you're misguided, this isn't gonna work. And he's just like, no.
Yeah, that's really cool, that fight, because he just like stands there and then like for like pages and then has like a one panel punch.
Yeah, it's not like a fight, really. It's just basically like, this isn't going to happen, dude.
Speaking of Swamp Thing not really doing anything, the last 3 issues of this trade are a different storyline about
the devil,
some Monkey King and the devil, and Ouija Abigail Arcane's new job with kids. Look, again,
the demon Etrigan?
Demon Etrigan. I told you I had a hard time with the humans in this, and these last 3 really kind of lost me a little bit. I did not like these last 3 issues as much as the rest of the story.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the first time I read this, I was like, I read this about like 5 to 10 years ago, and I was like, the first half of this is really good, and the last 3 issues kind of like, they don't really like follow the same through line. It's not like Swamp Thing fighting plants. There's not much Swamp Thing. It's like following this devil demon character. This time, after probably reading more Vertigo, I'm like, I like this. This is pleasant.
Especially
I might have to reread it and pay a little more attention to it, but for some reason I was just expecting something different, and it didn't sit well with me.
I mean, this, like, I don't want to give it too much credit because obviously, like weird stories and, kind of EC Comics style stuff existed. But I feel like this is really like the modern Vertigo, like 3-issue format.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is what a lot of like Hellblazer and Preacher and stuff is.
Yeah, I was about to say the exact thing.
Yeah,
There's a lot of Preacher and a lot of Hellblazer in this, which is funny because didn't Constantine get created out of this run?
I don't know. Did he already exist, or was he created
I think
here?
He's an Alan Moore creation as a Swamp Thing villain-ish kind of thing. I can look it up.
Wow, he might be one of those like Tomb of Dracula characters or some DC equivalent where like he showed up in House of Mystery number 27, but then everyone forgot who he was.
Nope. First appearance, Saga of the Swamp Thing, number 37.
Yep. Well, there you have it.
About 10 issues from where we are. All right, interesting.
So even more of the new DC universe that Alan Moore immediately created. It's not enough that they're bringing Dr. Manhattan into the mainstream DC universe.
So I think my biggest problem with these issues, though, is he continues that kind of same moody style of like doing a lot of cool introspection, but there's just it doesn't feel focused. I think Vince, you said that it doesn't feel like it's focused on any one character, and I think by the time I realized, oh, Abigail is the one we're supposed to be focusing on, it was kind of the story was kind of over, and I was like, oh, okay, and that's all right. I just didn't give me a reason to really care about Abigail, or any of the characters involved. She gets a job working with kids, and one of the kids is obsessed with spelling things, and there might have been some demon thing in his past, and a Monkey King. And is the demon Etrigan pretending to be the Monkey King? Is that what it is? Like he's... I was very confused by a lot of this.
I don't think so.
I think he like manifested, or the Ouija board manifests the Monkey King, and Etrigan's kind of involved in that way.
Yeah, Etrigan's like on the trail of the Monkey King.
But that's not that king from like classic Journey to the West stories.
No, it's a like demon.
Yeah, there's a lot of demons in here.
He goes to the curiosity shop and is like, "Have you sold any Ouija boards that look like this?" And then because he sees like a painting, I think a Goya painting, and he's like, "Uh-oh."
Yeah, but I love all the introductions to Etrigan. Like the first scene, he's like, "You're gonna die like later today," and he tells like people how they're all gonna die. And then he talks about the Goya painting, and he's like, "Oh, I remember when he started this, but I never got to see how it turned out." And I'm like, that's just such a fun, like, cool, like character building throwaway line. Like, it says everything.
I really liked. Yeah, I really like the part at the end actually, where Etrigan has been posing as some human who's been talking to Abigail and making friends, but it's not as cut and dry as that because the demon made a bargain with this guy, and so they kind of inhabit the same place now, and he's finding himself turning more and more slowly into Etrigan, which is a neat concept about somebody who's kind of sold their soul to the devil and is kind of dealing with that while still trying to fight it off. I like that idea.
Is that the dude in the hotel room that's her ex or her husband?
No, that's Etrigan is who he's describing.
Okay.
Yeah. The other guy, her husband, oh yeah, he like gets in a car crash, a drunk driving accident. I don't know what that had to do with anything else or why. Is he dead?
That's just seeding. No, you see him at the end, don't you?
Oh, you're right. That's right. He picks her up. I was flipping back through it and I saw that and I was like, wait a minute, what? Why? And the part was fine.
It's just seeding. It's a storyline in Volume 2, which is really good.
I see. Okay.
I like Abigail more than you, apparently, so maybe you won't agree.
I'm sorry. Well, I didn't... I mean, maybe if I kept reading and maybe if I kind of knew that it was going to be... that she was such a big deal, but I kind of lumped her in with all the other humans, and I was like, all right, I'll keep reading until they tell me to care about it.
To know that Arcane, not Abigail Arcane, is like Swamp Thing's biggest villain, and she's like his nephew? Or his niece, right, Chris?
Niece,
yes. Yeah, like Swamp Thing's like biggest villain is like Abigail Arcane's uncle. So there's an extra thing in there. That's why she looks kind of weird with the white hair and kind of witchy. She definitely plays into that, and her son or little brother factors heavily into the Snyder run as like a murderous child. I'd read that Snyder run. It's pretty fucking good.
I'm not a big fan of the Scott Snyder, so I'll probably never get around to it. I think. Should I? I don't know.
I particularly liked it. I like the art. Yannick Paquette was never better.
Yeah, it's good. Right. It's a little bit of nostalgia for this.
Yeah, it's very nostalgic for this run. But it's enjoyable if you read it with Ant-Man. So. Or Animal Man, not Ant-Man.
Ant-Man? Oh, Animal Man, yeah. Because that's right, because the whole plant and animal thing, they were all tying in together for a little while there. I guess that part of the show... So so Chris, you've definitely read all this Swamp Thing run before. Vince, you said you've only read the first one, or maybe the first couple.
I read this, but I do not remember much. I did not remember much of it. I thought it was really well done, and I think I bought it right when it got reprinted, so I never got a chance to buy Volume 2 to read more.
You think you're gonna keep going?
I think I might. There's not much to this run. There's only like 3 or 4 years of it, right, Chris? Like we read...
It goes on.
I think it's six volumes. I think
5 or 6 volumes for Saga the Swamp Thing. I know the artist leaves, which is sad because I think he really contributes a lot to the style of it.
I like it though. I think having read more Vertigo now, it's very early Vertigo. I don't even know if Vertigo existed and Vertigo was created for this comic. I think is what happened. Where they're about.
Yeah, they didn't have a like dedicated line. I think Swamp Thing was like the cornerstone of like, well, we're gonna make books like this now.
It's a historical
led into
comic.
like Sandman and everything. Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny. The first 2 years, I'd say, of Sandman, it's just a love letter to this, and then it totally becomes a different thing that's not like this.
This is a lot like Sandman. You're right. That is.
It is a lot like Sandman. Yeah, I definitely found myself thinking of Sandman as I was reading this, been like, okay, yeah, there's some similarities there, but this I feel does it better. Sandman, it gets going later, but yeah, it just doesn't match the quality of this. Yeah. I don't think.
I do like Sandman a lot. Just for if there's any listeners out there that are like offended by what Kia just said. I
don't give a shit. I'll offend everybody.
Sandman's very good. It just takes a while. Because I think, like I said, Neil Gaiman, I think was very clear. He was like, I've given up on comic books, and then he read Alan Moore and was like, oh, I could just steal this.
Yeah, it takes like I've tried to read the first volume of Sandman like multiple times. I think I should probably just start with volume 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Kia, what did you think of this? Because you're new to this.
You know, like I said, I loved that first half and really did not like the second half. So I don't know. I want to keep reading because I know I should. It's really dense and it's just going to take me a while, but I'll probably do it at some point. I'll probably at least do volume 2 and then see how I'm feeling after that before I decide if I want to move on. But yeah, I like by the end of the first half, and when Floronic Man was defeated, I was like, all right, I'm gung-ho. Can't wait to see what the next thing is. And the next thing, bummed me out a little bit. So I'm still on the fence. Still going to read a little bit more just to check it out. But even when I'm not, super happy with it, all the language that Alan Moore uses is just so beautiful. And I think it's really a comic you have to read slow. I did read these last 3 in a little bit more of a hurry. So maybe I should just sit down, take my time with it, because I think that makes a big difference. It's definitely not a comic you can read quickly just breezing through it, because every line of dialogue is very purposeful and deliberate, kind of like Alan Moore's style. So that's what I'm thinking. But yeah, it's still really good. I still really like it. And gosh, that art, maybe I'll just flip through and look at all the art because it's beautiful. I love that.
I think if anything, the art gets even better in volume 2, because I think, especially like if you look at the covers of these issues, it's so weird because it's like someone at DC was like, please like resubmit this so it looks like a regular comic we can sell to people.
Yeah. It's very like action-packed covers when there's very little action in the stories.
Right, and it's very much like, the Jack Kirby style of like draw a lot of characters on there and like show what's happening. It's like that's not really what this book is about. Like it's very misleading in a way of like you see the cover and you're like, I don't know if this is for me. But then you look at the interior art and it's so crazy. And I feel like once it, finds its legs, I think really in volume 2, then DC kind of relaxes and is like, this is a Vertigo book now, whatever that means. So if you want to have plant sex, I guess you can.
Cool.
But they got to cut out the JLA.
Right. So plant sex. Can't wait. I'll definitely read volume 2 for the plant sex.
It's very heavily hinted at, Kia. Come on.
It's consensual plant sex, though.
Consensual? Count me out. No, that's a joke. That's a terrible joke. All right. All right. So I think with that we need to close the book on Swamp Thing. Any last things we wanna say? This was, I think, did I pick this? this was my choice. I'd always wanted to read this. I know you guys had spoken very heavily of it, so I'm glad I picked it. Yeah, I think that's all we got to say. Next time, Chris, it's your pick. What are we reading?
We are heading down south to the Andes.
Whoa.
Donald Duck's Lost in the Andes.
Yes!
I'm excited for this.
I am very excited.
We were trying to think of like what we should read, and I don't know why. I've always had like, this is Carl Barks, who wrote a lot of Scrooge McDuck comics. And we talked about doing like Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck from Don Rosa, but I always forget about it. And then you were like, Lost in the Andes, and I'm like, oh, fuck, yeah. Because it's like 1949 Donald Duck.
Yeah. Now, all right, if you're out there listening and you're like, Donald Duck comics? Really? Like, what the fuck are they doing? No. Listen. These things are classics of the art form. And, yeah, I can't wait to... I've never read Lost in the Andes. I can't wait to get into it and talk about it. But yeah, Carl Barks, like just a wonderful comic book writer. And, did he write and draw them?
Yes.
Every comic book site talks about Carl Barks like in hushed tones. Like I've never read him, but like they always talk like super reverently. I'm like, I mean, there's Donald Duck comics. There's no reason why this should be good. Nothing that shouldn't appear in the back of Disney Adventures magazine. But
right.
So I'm very excited to actually see what the deal is. I mean, I was looking on Amazon and it said that it was for ages 4 to 8. So hopefully,
yeah. He's a very visual because he is a writer and artist. There's a great, I don't know, I haven't fact checked, but there was a great, I think, Cracked article that was all the like inventions and other ideas that just showed up in Donald Duck comics. They were all just like visual ideas where he's like, this would be cool, and now they're like real products.
Like the tablet from Star Trek Next Generation?
Basically, yes. Not exactly like that, but yes.
Because it was Star Trek Next Generation, they had a bunch of like iPads because they just did, the prop department didn't want to make a bunch of extra props for like doctor shit and like controlling this. So they just made like, it's just a flat piece of a board and you just touch it weird. And then like nerds were like,
I'm using it to look at Swamp Thing right now.
Whoa. So yeah, next time, Lost in the Andes. I think it's a collection that has some other short stories in there. Maybe we'll talk about those too. We're going to focus on Lost in the Andes. So yeah, join us next time for that. But until then, I think that's it. Anything else we need to say before we're done? I think we're done.
Just one more thing. Swamp Thing is great. What I like about it the most is that it does such a great job. If you like Buffy and other things where they have metaphors where you're like, oh, this is really about that. Swamp Thing does a great job of that, especially Volume 2. So,
all right, I'll get to it. I'll report back next time on what I thought about Volume 2.
All right,
hold me to it.
Feet to the fire.
All right. Feet in the fire.
Cat in the furnace.
Ooh, yeah. Well, thank you so much for listening, everybody. For Vince, Chris, and myself, Kia. I love you. I'll talk to you later. Happy New Year, 2017. Swamp Thing for president.
Drain the swamp.
Earth really needs you.